Good day, fight fans, and welcome back to another UFC Fight Night betting card prediction and Draftkings picks breakdown. We're finally back after a 2-week hiatus, and it feels good to dive into the action again. This week, the UFC heads to Paris, France for UFC Fight Night, Imavov versus Borralho. On paper, this is a tricky card. We've got close matchups, live underdogs, and stylistic clashes that make it both exciting and, honestly, a little dangerous for betting. But as always, I'll give you my best reads, exposures, and Draftkings strategies so we can all hopefully cash out on some well-deserved winnings. Let's jump right into it. Main event, Nassourdine Imavov versus Caio Borralho in the middleweight division. This fight is as close as it gets stylistically. Imavov, the French hometown fighter, thrives in a stand-up battle with his technical boxing, range control, and slick counterpunching. If he can keep Borralho at distance and force this into a striking affair, there's definitely a path for him to win on points. But Borralho has that classic pressure style, mixing his awkward but effective striking with a relentless grappling game. If he can blend his takedowns with ground control, I think he grinds out the win. My pick, Caio Borralho. On Draftkings, I'll be heavier on Borralho with 55% exposure, while still giving Imavov 35% as a live underdog. Co-main event, Benoit Saint-Denis versus Mauricio Ruffi in the lightweight division. This one is fireworks written all over it. Both guys are finishers, both bring insane aggression, and I honestly think this could steal fight of the night. Benoit Saint-Denis, the god of war, is fighting in front of his home crowd and brings relentless pressure with dangerous grappling and heavy striking. Ruffi, though, is no slouch. He's got sharp boxing, speed, and the kind of killer instinct to match Saint-Denis. I see paths for both fighters, but for the sake of the show, my lean is Benoit Saint-Denis. Draftkings exposures, 40% Saint-Denis, 35% Ruffi. I want both sides because this fight has high finishing potential. Modestas Bukauskas versus Paul Craig in the light heavyweight division. Now, Paul Craig is always dangerous with his submissions, but honestly, he struggles when he can't get the fight to the ground. Bukauskas, on the other hand, has the cleaner stand-up, better movement, and enough takedown defense to really frustrate Craig. Unless Craig pulls off one of his trademark guard subs, I see Modestas Bukauskas taking the victory here. For Draftkings, I'm looking at about 25% exposure to Bukauskas and 10% to Craig. Bolaji Oki versus Mason Jones in the lightweight division. Bolaji Oki brings speed and explosiveness, but Mason Jones has more tools, especially his wrestling and relentless pressure. If Jones mixes in his grappling, I think he neutralizes Oki's quick hands. My pick is Mason Jones. For Draftkings, I'd go 40% exposure to Jones and 25% to Oki. Rhys McKee versus Axel Sola at welterweight. This fight is interesting because Sola is still relatively unproven at this level, but what I've seen from him suggests he's the sharper striker with a solid all-around game. McKee is tough, with good volume striking, but defensively, he leaves a lot of openings. I'll side with Axel Sola here, but honestly, I'm leaning toward betting the over as well. For Draftkings, I'm thinking 25% exposure to Sola and just 5% to McKee. Up next, we have Patricio Pitbull going toe-to-toe with Lozin Keita in the featherweight division. These are two heavy-handed strikers squaring off, and oh boy, it's going to be a striking battle for sure. Pitbull, well, he's a legend known for his power and durability, but Keita is the younger, faster, and sharper prospect. Personally, I expect this to be a striking battle and will look to play the over. My pick, Lozin Keita. For those playing on Draftkings, I'm looking at 35% exposure to Keita and 20% to Pitbull. Now, let's talk about William Gomis facing off against Robert Ruchala in another featherweight clash. Gomis has faced stiffer competition and should be able to handle Ruchala. Ruchala's looked good, sure, but mostly against lesser opposition and hasn't been tested at this level. I see Gomis using his experience to control the fight, so my pick is William Gomis. If you're considering DraftKings, I suggest 35% exposure to Gomis and 10% to Ruchala. Lastly, we have Umar Sy versus Brenson Ribeiro in the light heavyweight category. This one, it really feels like a showcase spot. Umar Sy has the size, power, and momentum on his side, while Ribeiro, well, he tends to get wild and reckless. I like Umar Sy to get it done. For those on DraftKings, I'm thinking 55% exposure to Sy and just 5% to Ribeiro. Marcin Tybura versus Ante Delija in the heavyweight division. This rematch is, 10 years in the making. Delija won their first meeting, but since then, Tybura has fought the who's who of the heavyweight division and really developed into a grinder who can wear his opponents down. Still, Delija is dangerous, and I think he just edges out a close one here. My pick is Ante Delija, but honestly, this is a low confidence call, so bet carefully. For DraftKings, I'm looking at 35% exposure to Delija and 30% to Tybura. Harry Hardwick versus Caio Fernandez in the lightweight division. This is your classic striker versus grappler matchup. If Fernandez can keep it standing, he's the more seasoned striker and should edge it out. But, if Hardwick drags him down, things could definitely flip. I'll side with Fernandez here. On DraftKings, I'm thinking 35% exposure to Fernandez and 20% to Hardwick. Sam Patterson versus Trey Waters at welterweight. Honestly, this is one of my least confident picks on the card. Both fighters are inconsistent and, well, pretty tough to trust. If I have to pick, I'll go with Sam Patterson, but tread lightly. For DraftKings, it's just 8% exposure to Patterson and 8% to Waters, so yeah, minimal exposure here. Brad Tavares versus Robert Bryczek in the middleweight division is honestly a pretty solid striker versus striker matchup. But Tavares definitely has the wrestling edge here. If he actually leans on that, he can grind out a win. My pick is Brad Tavares. For DraftKings exposure, I'm looking at 40% Tavares and 20% Bryczek. Up next, we've got Andreas Gustafsson taking on Rinat Fakhretdinov at welterweight. Fakhretdinov is a real pressure machine, but Gustafsson brings the size, the striking, and maybe just enough takedown defense to keep things standing. I'm actually going with the upset here, Andreas Gustafsson. For DraftKings, I like 35% Gustafsson and 15% Fakhretdinov. Shauna Bannon versus Sam Hughes in the women's strawweight division. Bannon is more of a point striker, but Hughes is the stronger, more aggressive fighter who can really push forward and land the heavier shots. I like Sam Hughes to win here. DraftKings exposure for me is 30% Hughes, 8% Bannon. And that's the full breakdown for UFC Paris, Imavov versus Borralho. It's a tough card, but with smart exposure and a few careful parlays, there's definitely good money to be made. Remember, stick to your strategy, manage that bankroll, and don't go all in on the low-confidence fights. Let me know your picks in the comments and how you're playing this card. If you enjoyed the breakdown, please hit that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe to the channel for more UFC betting and DraftKings content. Best of luck this weekend, and may the betting gods be on our side.